Scott Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise and take a brief call on the first reading of this Victim Orders Against Violent Offenders Bill in the name of the Honourable Judith Collins. It's always interesting, Mr Speaker, to follow that member Andrew Little, who is a good old-fashioned socialist from way back, and in fact I'm disappointed that he's not contender number 4, because with a speech like that you could rightly believe that he was a contender in every other respect other than being a nominee in the contest that is so captivating members of the Labor Party at the moment. But as is in the best tradition of good old-fashioned socialists, there is something that is buried deep in the psyche that somehow wants to create victims that are victims again. And so I'm delighted to be able to speak in support of this piece of legislation that proudly, and I think rightly so, puts the victim first in our criminal justice system. This is another piece of legislation that the Honourable Judith Collins has championed in a way that is become almost a trademark hallmark of her administration, and it's one that I support. And she is, and as I do, make no apology for putting victims first in our criminal justice system. It's completely unacceptable, Mr Speaker, that victims of serious crime cannot be free from ongoing intimidation and persecution from those that have done the offending against them. That victims cannot be allowed to get on freely with their lives, to return their lives to some sense of normality after being the victim of a serious crime, strikes me as being completely unacceptable in a modern society. And so I make no apology on behalf of the government for putting the rights of victims first in our system. So this new piece of legislation is introducing a restraining order to protect victims of serious crime, or indeed sexual crimes, from further unwanted contact with those people that have perpetrated attacks upon them. And it's completely unacceptable, sir, that a situation like this could have been allowed to occur for so long, because victims can feel intimidated. In fact, it can be more than just a feeling of intimidation. It can be actual, real intimidation by having, for instance, a previous offender moving close into their neighbourhood, maintaining contact with them, and being able to further persecute them even after the sentence that they have been convicted of has been served. So this piece of legislation, sir, seeks to remedy that, and I say about time too. Currently, protection and restraining orders are only available where there has been active harassment, or if there is a situation where there's a domestic relationship between the offender and the victim. And unfortunately, that means that for some victims there is currently no legal protection available to them, and I say that's simply not good enough. So these new orders that will be issued by the District Court will impose a range of conditions upon offenders, including restrictions on visiting particular locations or geographical areas where the victim may be. This is a new mechanism. It's established to recognise the ongoing effects of violent offences on those victims. And fear and anxiety about unwanted contact is a very, very real factor for many of those victims. It can impair their recovery and their pathway back to a free and normal life after having become the victims of serious crime. And so, as a government, we want to ensure that all victims can be protected from unwanted contact with the person who has offended against them and get back to enjoying their normal life. This bill establishes a mechanism to do exactly that. It's a non-contact order, and it will prohibit an offender from having any form of contact with a victim, and may also prohibit the offender from entering any specified area or from living or working in that specified area. The District Court is able to impose any conditions or directions in relation to any prohibition that it considers reasonably necessary in those circumstances, and I, for one, think that is a good thing. An application for a non-contact order, it's important to note, cannot be made by a victim if there is already in existence a protection order against the offender under the Domestic Violence Act of 1995. So, sir, in summary, this is a good piece of legislation brought to the House by a very capable and proactive minister doing a terrific job on behalf of the victims of violent crime in our society. I commend the bill absolutely to the House, and I will watch with interest its progress through the Select Committee stages.
Great speech. I call the Honourable